Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. We are getting right into February now with an amazing lineup of events coming your way. But for today, we're going to jump into one of our really fun series that we're doing with Parks Canada. It is called the Mountain Parks Peak Discovery Series. So we launched this in September, and it is going to run right through to the end of this school year. So each month you can join us for exciting virtual education programs live from Jasper, Waterton Lakes, Banff, Kootenay, Glacier, and Yoho National Parks. Each program shares a unique story and will give us a look behind the scenes at these amazing places with Parks Canada experts. So these fun interactive presentations explore a variety of topics, including wildlife conservation, archaeology, history, protecting at-risk species, and so much more. So if you want to get a jump start on some of the events coming up, you can head over to our website here, exploringbytheseat.com/peak, and you can find those events and register for them. You can also see the past events that we've hosted as well in this series. And if en français is a little more your speed, you can head over to the website as well, and you can find the option there for the events in French. Very cool. Check out those links. I'll share them again throughout the broadcast. So joining us live today, we are going to find out if the loss of one butterfly can have a profound effect on an ecosystem. So we're going to learn a little bit about species at risk and how the loss of these species can change ecosystems in large and fundamental ways. And we've got the butterfly master, Marion McGraw, joining us, the public outreach and education officer with Parks Canada. Let's bring her in front and center. Hey, Marion, how are we doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. It's great to see you. We always love having you backstage and jumping into these events with us.
It's always a pleasure, Joe. I always love being here and sharing everything with all of our classes from all over the place. It's really fantastic.
Perfect. Well, we have a huge group joining us today. I can see a bunch of classrooms tuning in on YouTube. We have classes hanging out backstage in camera spots. I do want to give a shout out to our YouTube crew. Use that chat sidebar. Get some practice right now. Let us know who you are, where are you watching from, what grade are you in, because when the question and answer time comes, we want to see some questions coming from our crew across Canada. So we're looking forward to seeing those questions. Get ready too. There will be a Kahoot quiz, and I will give you those instructions when the time comes. But Marion, for now, I'm out of here. You're going to take over for a bit, and then we'll have some Kahoot and some Q&A.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, Joe, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. As Joe said, my name is Marion McGraw, and I am a public outreach and education officer with Parks Canada. And today I am presenting on behalf of Waterton Lakes National Park. I think I have one of the coolest jobs in the world because I get to do educational programs in person as well as online, sharing all of this information and meeting students from Alberta, British Columbia, and when I get to do programs like this, even further abroad. So I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so excited that you could join me today. So today we are going to be talking about species at risk and the importance of everything in the ecosystem, from the largest of mammals down to the teeny tiniest little insect and everything in between. But before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that Waterton Lakes National Park is in the traditional territories of the Siksika Stepti, the Blackfoot Confederacy, which consists of the following nations: Kainai, Piikani, Siksika, and Amskapi Piikani. Waterton Lakes National Park falls within Treaty 7 territory, which also includes Tsuut'ina Nation and Stoney Nakoda, Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Wesley bands. The Ktunaxa Nation and the Métis Nation Region 3 Association also claim Waterton as being in their traditional territory. The lands and waters of Waterton have been used for millennia by Indigenous peoples for sustenance, ceremony, trade, and travel. We thank them for their continued stewardship and for sharing the land with us. So now, what is a species at risk? The name is pretty self-explanatory. It's a species that is at risk of something, but what is that something? Well, essentially, it's a species that faces the risk of extinction from various threats, such as habitat loss or climate change. Here in Canada, we have a piece of legislation, so laws, called the Species at Risk Act, or SARA, that protects all species at risk that call Canada home. If an animal is listed under SARA, there becomes a legal obligation for Canadians to protect that particular species. Do any of you know what any species at risk? Unfortunately, there are a lot of creatures in Canada listed under SARA, but I would love to hear some of your guesses. And I'll also show you some images to give you some hints.
All right. We're
For
going
a
to put a
few, you
few
might go.
classrooms on the spot
Nice.
here and see if they can shout out some for us. Marion, how's that sound?
That sounds great.
Perfect. If you are joining via the YouTube, put some answers in the chat. What other kind of species do you think might be species at risk in Canada? So let's put a few classrooms on the spot. Let's try Miss Benoit's crew. What do you think? What do you think some species at risk in Canada are?
Argonoid. That's a frog.
Okay, so some frogs. Okay.
There are some frogs, yeah.
Yeah. What about JK Room 19? What do you think? You just have to unmute the mic quick so we can hear your guess. I see a couple here in the chat as well. Baby turtles.
Ooh, yeah, there's one there, Blanding's turtle specifically in that picture.
Cougars, that's a good one. Whales.
Yep, the southern resident killer whales are definitely on that list.
All right, I see a few tigers coming in. Yes, they are definitely species at risk, but I don't think we have too many in the forests of Canada.
I was going to say they're Canada.
Oh, go ahead, Miss Benoit's crew. You put your mic back on.
Is it on? Oh, Lake Sturgeon.
Lake Sturgeon. Okay, there's some good guesses there, and then one more online here. Elk. Someone's guessing elk here, and burrowing owl. That's a good one too.
Burrowing owl is a good one. Yeah. If you're talking about the picture in the corner, that one is a caribou, specifically woodland caribou, that call some of the national parks in the mountains home. So thank you so much. Those are some great answers. Thanks for all the answers in the chat box and the students who came up to tell their answers on the microphone. I wish I could tell you every single animal that was on the list, but the Species at Risk Act is over 150 pages long. That's a lot of things to memorize. So we could read the entire document together today, but I think I might actually put you to sleep. So let me break down the important stuff. Under SARA, there are 5 different levels of species at risk. There's extinct, extirpated, endangered, threatened, and species of special concern. So keep those terms in mind. Each of these levels are different and require different amounts of attention and protection for the animals that are listed under those specific levels. That would be a lot of work to put a bunch of resources into bringing an animal back from extinction when we could put that same time and energy into saving an animal that is endangered from going extinct. And as much as I would love to one day go to a theme park with real live dinosaurs, even if we do have a few movies telling us that's probably not the best idea, it's not super realistic. But we can realistically keep the organisms, the creatures we have on Earth, still here. So those 5 levels, they might seem a little bit similar if you're not super familiar with them. So let's go through them all and see what they all mean. Starting with extinct. Now, you've probably heard this word before. This is probably the easiest one to nail down. Species that are extinct are species that no longer exist anywhere on the planet. And dinosaurs are a good example of that. Or more recently, the dodo bird. We're no longer capable of helping these animals, but it is still extremely valuable to recognize them. It is a really sad thing to lose a species completely, but every extinct species offers a unique learning opportunity. They went extinct for some reason, and knowing what caused the extinction, that can help us protect future species from the same fate. An extinction event like the asteroid that destroyed the dinosaurs, that would be pretty hard to stop without the help of super space lasers, or like in the movies, a team of miners led by Bruce Willis to drill in explosives into the asteroid, which is a reference I realize some of you might be too young to get, but it's a good movie. The dodo bird tells a different story, though. They were harvested, had their habitat destroyed by humans, and were outcompeted by introduced species. All of these factors led to their extinction. Leopard's extinction was preventable and caused almost entirely by human negligence. Moving forward, we need to learn from their story and not make the same mistakes. So extirpated is the next level, and it's a little of a specialized word. Does anyone have any idea what extirpated might mean? You can type your answer into the chat box if you think you might have an idea.
Let's put another class on the spot here as well.
Absolutely.
Let's try Mrs. Callahoo's crew. What do you think extirpated means?
Nearly extinct.
Nearly extinct. That's a pretty good guess.
All right, let's check one more here with Mr. Roy's crew. You guys have a guess. What do you think extirpated means?
Rocks in the sky.
So do you want to come up? You can click if there's a speak on there. Click
No, just move the computer down. Move the computer.
I think it means like very close to being extincted in like low numbers.
No, Thomas.
Okay, good stuff. And then we've got a
Yeah.
couple coming in online here. Again, thinking there's not, Miss Latch's crew thinks there's not many of them left in certain areas.
Yeah, and I see some in the chat box here, only in some countries. So those are all great guesses. An extirpated species is a species that's what's called sort of locally extinct, meaning it can no longer be found in places where it once used to be, although there are still populations that live elsewhere. So one example of this is the Northwest Atlantic population of the Atlantic walrus, who are extirpated from Canada, but they still occur in places like Greenland, Norway, and Russia. So we can look at extirpated species from many different scales. Locally, so species that no longer occur in Waterton Lakes National Park, for example. Regionally, so species that you can no longer find in southern Alberta, or even nationally, where they don't occur in Canada anymore. The difference between extirpated and an extinct species is that they can still be found on the planet, so it's possible to bring back extirpated species if we work hard to rebuild the habitat that they were extirpated from and find out the reasons why they became extirpated in the first place. There's a possibility to repopulate these species from groups of animals that are found elsewhere. So before we get to that point, though, we have to do a ton of research to make sure that they don't become extirpated once again. Now, the next level is endangered species. Endangered species is probably the one we hear the most about. Endangered species are any species that face an imminent, so immediate threat of extirpation or extinction, meaning if we don't help them now, they will become extinct soon. So two species that are endangered in Canada and are located and protected here in Waterton Lakes National Park are the little brown bat and the whitebark pine tree. These two species are threatened primarily by disease. The little brown bat populations are declining due to something called white nose syndrome. So it's a disease caused by a fungus that grows on their noses and their wings, and it's very itchy and irritating, and it causes them to wake up during hibernation. And the whitebark pine trees are threatened by a disease called blister rust. So focusing time, effort, and resources on endangered species can help save them from extirpation or extinction. Parks Canada is working hard to protect the habitat for both of these species, and even going as far as planting thousands of whitebark pine seedlings all across the Rocky Mountains. And if you want to learn more about these species and what Parks Canada is doing to protect them, you can check out some of the previous programs that are on the Peak Discovery Series YouTube. There's one about bats and one about whitebark pine trees. And you can find those on YouTube on the Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants channel. Moving down the scale, now we get to threatened species. So threatened species are species at risk of becoming endangered if nothing is done to protect their habitat and their population. It sounds very similar to endangered, and the distinction between the two is kind of hard to visualize. They still need protection, but their populations are usually larger than endangered species. But if we don't start helping them, they will more than likely become endangered. So two species in the mountain national parks that are threatened are the olive-sided flycatcher and the west slope cutthroat trout. Like endangered species, with proper and timely action, threatened species can be protected. Both the olive-sided flycatcher and the cutthroat trout have experienced significant habitat loss, which is the reason for them being on the threatened list. Again, Parks Canada is working hard to protect these species' habitats by restricting access to areas that they call home. And finally, the last on the list are species of special concern. These species are sensitive to human activities or natural events, for instance, a wildfire or the development of human infrastructure. They are not yet endangered or threatened, And one animal on this list is the grizzly bear, who is very sensitive to the presence of humans and human disturbance. So any animals you see in the national parks, be sure to give them their space. It is their home, and we don't want to harm them in any way possible. We touched briefly on a few animals who are at risk, and you might have noticed there's a few things that they have in common, a little bit of common theme. Did anyone catch some of those common themes? Well, they're basically are becoming threatened because of some sort of disturbance, whether it's a disease, habitat loss, or climate change. All these species have experienced a significant disturbance that their populations aren't able to handle without some help. Any organism, whether it's a plant, a bug, a bird, or an apex predator, can be at risk. And losing any single species can be devastating. Every species has its own unique role and purpose in the ecosystem, just like how all of us have unique roles in our own lives. So, to give a metaphor that's probably pretty relevant for everybody watching, we'll look at a school. So everyone in a school has a specific and very important role that needs to be filled in order to keep the school running. Number one is all of you watching, the students. I would consider you the keystone species of a school. Without students, there wouldn't be need for the school. And what's your role in this school ecosystem? It's learning. A very, very important job, and there would be no schools without each and every one of you. Your teachers facilitate your learning and make sure each one of you are taken care of. So let's give them a big cheer for all the amazing teachers that brought you here today to get to take part in this presentation. Now, your principal and other administration staff do a lot of the background work to make sure your classrooms have everything they need to succeed. They're like the wizard behind the curtain, being the leaders in the school. And the custodians keep the school safe and in working order to enable everyone else to succeed. And there's so many more as well, like teachers' assistants, school bus drivers, cafeteria workers, if your school has a cafeteria, and I'm sure I'm missing some important ones. But it takes a lot to make a school run. A school can't operate without any of these individuals. If one of these individuals were to suddenly disappear, the school wouldn't operate. If you remove the students, there would be no point to school. If you remove the teachers, you wouldn't be able to learn. If you remove custodians, the school would be pretty uncomfy. So everyone has their role, and each of those roles is equally as important. The same goes for an ecosystem. Every plant, bug, bird, animal plays an incredibly important part to keeping the ecosystems operating. So let's move from the classroom to Waterton Lakes National Park, specifically a magical and biodiverse place called the Blackiston Fan. It is a beautifully diverse grassland at the foot of the mountains, home to, as you can see, some incredible wildflowers. It houses herds of elk, packs of coyotes, and in the summer, it is butterfly galore. I love butterflies. They're so small and delicate, and they come in so many different colors. And one of those butterflies in Waterton is a species at risk, specifically an endangered species. So this species isn't the flashiest butterfly, nor is it the biggest, but this little creature plays an important role in the ecosystem. And I'm talking about the half-moon hairstreak that you can see in this picture here. Although it looks like a moth, it is actually a butterfly, believe it or not. This little butterfly has a wingspan of about 2 to 3 centimeters in length, so roughly the size of my thumb. And their lifespan is just as short as their wings as well. Once they emerge out of their pupae, they live for roughly around 6 days. In those 6 days, they certainly make their mark on their ecosystem and play a very important role. The half-moon hairstreak is found in only 2 places in Canada. There's a population that can be found in the southern interior of BC and into Montana, and then it spreads throughout some of the western United States, which is 400 kilometers away from the extremely isolated population that lives here in Waterton. Having a population that's isolated means that we won't see any butterflies from the BC population move in and add to the butterflies that are here. So they're basically on their own out there. In Waterton, the half-moon hairstreak lives in an even smaller space called the Blackiston Fan, the place that I showed you earlier with those beautiful flowers. The Blackiston Fan is a small floodplain, and it's highlighted here in red. So it is a very small area, and it is extremely sensitive to any major changes to habitat. For instance, wildfire. In 2017, there was a major wildfire that came through this area and burnt the majority of the Blackiston Fan. Fast forward to the following year, in 2018, only 6 half-moon hair streaks were observed. 6. It's a tiny little number. The fire nearly extirpated the half-moon hair streak from Waterton Lakes National Park. Now imagine if a flood had come through in 2018 when we only saw 6 butterflies. That very well could have been the end for the half-moon hair streak in Waterton Lakes National Park. Luckily, in the years since, we've seen the populations rise, but the risk of a large disturbance event is still there. So Parks Canada is working closely with the Calgary Zoo and the Wilder Institute to better understand the half-moon and to help protect its habitat. So what exactly would happen if we lost the half-moon hair streak? It only lives for about 6 days as an adult. It's only as big as my thumb. Well, remember the school? If we lost even one group in the school, it wouldn't function to the best of its abilities. The same goes for the Blackstone fan. If it loses one of the species that calls it home, there will be a profound effect on everything else around it. It's hard to gauge exactly what would happen if we lost this butterfly, but we can put our best guess forward. Now, I'll ask the group again, one more time, put you on the spot. What is the most important job for butterflies in the ecosystem? What do they do?
All right. Who haven't we put on the spot yet? Let's go to Miss M's crew and Mrs. Chris's crew. What do you think butterflies do that's really important for our ecosystem? Oh, the mic doesn't look like it's cooperating right now. I see answers coming in via the chat. If you want to try and type something into the private chat, we can grab that there as well. And if we can't get the mic going, we'll just get you to type your questions in the private chat as well. So no big deal. But I am getting a lot about pollinators. Pollinators coming in the private chat. Pollinators coming in via the YouTube chat. So no deviation. Everyone's going pollination.
Yes, exactly. Butterflies are pollinators, meaning they aid and assist in the reproduction process of plants by carrying pollen from one plant to another. And it turns out the half-moon hair streak is a key pollinator for a certain plant on the Blackstone fan, solidago or goldenrod. So from that knowledge, we can speculate that goldenrod may be affected in some way by the loss of the half-moon hair streak. So let's move on and take a look at a food web and take a deep dive into the ecosystem and find everything that's connected to the half-moon hair streak butterfly. So where would the half-moon hair streak belong on the food web? Since this little creature is our focus point, we'll start there. Now, what does the half-moon hair streak eat? It eats that blue plant right here, lupin, but only when it's a larvae. When it's all grown up and a beautiful butterfly, it pollinates yellow plants like solidago here. For some reason, it really likes yellow flowers. So we'll add solidago to the web. But I think it looks pretty incomplete still. I think we've still got some layers to go. So we've got pollinators and plants. What are we missing? Any answers in the chat? Bugs? Yeah. Fish?
What do you think, Mr. Roy's class? What's missing?
What's next? What do you think eats the plants?
No, I didn't ask you to come up, Sebastian. Roy, do you want to come up quickly? Quickly.
All right. What do you think? Who's missing from this chain so far?
So you have the butterfly that pollinates the plants and eats the plants. What do you think?
Maybe like the habitat.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Miss
So
Benoit's
all
group.
these live in the habitat. Yeah.
Bunnies.
Could be bunnies.
Rabbits, yeah?
Well, bunnies certainly are grazers, and that is the next level. So there's a bunch of different animals that roam the Blackstone fan that are grazers and eat the wonderful plants there. So, for example, elk. Quite often you'll see the elk hanging out in the Blackstone fan, and then deer as well. And not quite bunnies on this one, but we have some ground squirrels, and we also have some birds as well. The grouse. So it's looking great so far. We have one last level that we're missing, the top dogs of the ecosystem, and those are the predators. And I can think of a few predators that would look at the grazers that eat the plants and would see a pretty tasty meal. Foxes and coyotes for a start. It also can't be Waterton without one of the most famous animals, the bear. Now, this looks like a pretty good ecosystem. There's many different species, all playing different roles. We have some producers creating energy for everyone around. We have grazers keeping the plant community diverse and in check. Predators keeping populations in check as well. And of course, our pollinator, the half-moon hairstreak. When we look at it like this, we can see just how many species rely on the half-moon hairstreak. And this is only a small sample of all the organisms that call the Blackstone fan home. This little drab butterfly helps hold up the delicate balance of the ecosystem. And that's a lot of weight for a 3-centimeter long butterfly who only lives for roughly about 6 days. And what would happen if the half-moon hairstreak would disappear? The truth of the matter is, we don't know exactly what would happen if the half-moon hairstreak disappeared. We can speculate definitely that there would be changes to the solidago, as it is losing a key pollinator, as well as to the lupin, who is food for the larvae. Those changes to those two plants can have ripple effects that go out and alter the composition of every species in the Blackstone fan. It's hard to wrap your head around just how profound the effect of losing even the smallest of species can be to every organism around it, whether to interact directly or indirectly. We went through a lot, I know, in a very short amount of time. And thank you all for your participation and your guesses and taking part, talking about endangered species and species at risk. And I know that can be kind of a sad topic. That's why I love the half-moon hairstreak. It is still endangered and still needs a lot of protection. But we have seen this population grow in the years since the fire from 6 to well over 100. That is still very small, but it's getting so much better. The half-moon hairstreak is really only here in Waterton Lakes National Park, though. So although it is an endangered species that people that work for Parks Canada and live in Waterton can help, a lot of you are pretty far away and have your own local endangered species. So I urge every one of you to find out what species are in your area that are endangered or at risk. And if you can, do your part in protecting them. And remember, it doesn't matter how small or unassuming a species is, because all species are important and deserve to be protected. So thank you again so much. And I'm looking forward to our Kahoot and our questions.
All right. Marion, thank you so much. We are absolutely going to get to our Kahoot, but I think, you know, that was such a great presentation showing how important different parts of the ecosystem are. Every little creature plays its role. And I, for one, do not want to find out what happens if we do lose that species, because there's lots of stories from other places like Yellowstone National Park where they lost the wolves and it changed the whole ecosystem for the worse. So you don't want to play around and try to find out what would happen if this one species disappears. It's not a game we want to play for sure. All right. Well, let's get into the Kahoot action. I just shared a link via the private chat and via the YouTube chat as well. I'm going to pop up a banner and walk the classrooms through how to join as well. Kahoot.it. Once you get there, you can then enter the PIN number, which I'm going to share on my screen in just a moment. Now, as I'm doing that, a quick reminder that if you have one-to-one technology at your seat, maybe you have tablets or Chromebooks or something like that, well, of course, you can join that way. If your classroom does not, that is not a big deal at all. Your teacher could put up at the front of the room and you could yell out your answers to him or her. If you have a mobile device like the tablet or maybe a phone on hand, you can just scan that QR code and it'll bring it right in. And then it's going to give you these fun animal names pre-generated, like the aquatic dog and the ancient zebra and the fuzzy shark. We'll see if we get any butterfly names in here. As we do that, there will be 5 questions today, some true and false, some multiple choice. Get that answer right. We got points for you. Get it right even quicker in the 20 seconds allotted. As quickly as you can, you get more points. If you get it wrong, well, good try, but we got no points for you. You got to get it right. And the quicker you do it, the more points you're going to get. So kahoot.it, pin number 705-4718. I see tons of students joining right now. So we will let them go ahead and do that. We'll give them another few seconds. And again, if you can't jump on one-to-one, just pop it up at the front of the classroom and shout out your answers. If you can't get on at all, shout out your answers anyways and see how you do. All right, Marion, we've got lots of students joining. We'll give it a few more moments here to get some in, and then we'll take it live because I want to make sure we get a good Q&A session in as well. Let me scan the names quickly while we wait here and see if we did get any butterflies in here. All right, no random generated love for the butterflies yet, but we'll see. There'll be a lot of responsibility to the student who's representing the butterflies as well to try and come out on top. All right, I'm going to give it maybe 20 more seconds, and then we're going to take things live. The names are slowing down, so I think we're about ready to go live with our quiz today. All right, here we go. Best advice I can give you is read the questions carefully and then get the answer in that you think is the best fit. Here we go. Question 1 coming up. All right, I put a little extra time on the clock for this one. What are the 5 levels of species at risk? Is it dead, alive, really concerning and thriving? Is it extinct, extirpated, endangered, threatened, or special concern? Or is it extinct, endangered, special concern, dead, or alive? What do we think there? One is so much better than the others, but which one is it? I put a little extra time on there because I know it's a lot of reading to make sure we get this one answered. All right, good job, crew. It is extinct, extirpated, endangered, threatened, and special concern. Let's see what that does to our leaderboard as we get in here. The swift raccoon is holding down that top spot. Let's go to a little true and false action. An extirpated species is locally extinct but found elsewhere. Is that true or is that false? So extirpated species, found or locally extinct but found elsewhere. True or false? We've got about 6 seconds to get that answer locked in. Locally extinct, but found elsewhere. All right, we definitely learned that that was true. Like that walrus up there. Swift raccoon, still holding down that top spot. We're going to the next one. Why did the half moon hairstreaks population get so low in 2018? Was it a flood? Over harvesting? Was it fire? Or did birds eat them all? So a flood, over harvesting, fire, and birds eat them all. And then, Marion, that's another thing we didn't get in that food chain is all the things that are going to eat the hair streak.
Absolutely, yeah.
On it is food too. All right, good job, crew. Fire is the answer. The swift raccoon has been dethroned. The noble cat is in first place. Our next question here. How long does an adult half moon hair streak live? Was it 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 hours? What did we learn today? It definitely wasn't crazy long. Was it 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 hours? A few more seconds to get locked in. All right, 6 days, jam-packing a lot of living. The noble cat holding down that spot. Let's wrap it up with a true and false. It's not a big deal to remove some plant and animal species from an ecosystem. There's lots of animals and plants in an ecosystem, so it's really not a big deal if we take some out. Is that true or is that false? True or false, it's just not that big of a deal. All right, it's absolutely true. We just don't know what could happen when we remove different species, and everything we've seen so far says it's just not a good idea. We need everybody playing their role. So Space Squirrel in third, the Awesome Squid in second. and the noble cat holding on for that top spot. Good job, crew. Thanks so much for hanging out and playing Kahoot with us. Let's switch gears entirely and let's go to some Q&A action. Hiding out behind the scenes, we've got Dylan and Natalie from Waterton Lakes. How are you doing today?
Good. We're happy to be here.
All right, and they are here for some extra support to help our butterfly master and make sure we get all of our questions answered the best that we can. So if you are tuning in via YouTube, use that chat sidebar. Send us in your questions in the comments. If you are with us, Miss Benoit's class is saying they're the noble cat. So let me bring them in here. Congrats, noble cat. Good job. All right, very cool. Okay, well, we got you here front and center. So do we have any questions about what we learned today?
What's the biggest species at risk?
What's the biggest species at risk? Do you mean like the biggest animal that's a species at risk, or do you mean the ones that is most at risk?
The biggest animal.
The biggest animal. That is a good question. So
let's focus
so
on
like
Waterton.
I said, there's
What if we
in
focus on
Waterton?
Waterton? Yeah.
The biggest one in Waterton?
Yeah. What do you think, Dylan and Natalie? Is there a big species that's at risk in Waterton?
There's a big species at risk in Waterton. It's kind of a unique species, and it was in this presentation, but one of the biggest ones is actually the white bark pine tree. So it's not an animal species, but a plant species.
All right. We do sometimes forget about the plants and everything they're doing as the consumers, or sorry, not consumers, the producers in our ecosystem. So, and then all kinds of things like habitat and things like that. Very cool. So I think I see another question here. Are you up there with a question for us, my friend?
What's your favorite butterfly?
Oh, what's my favorite butterfly? Oh, that's a good question. I think my favorite butterfly is actually the monarch butterfly because of how far it travels. And that's a pretty cool species. Dylan and Natalie, do you have favorites?
I don't know too many butterflies, but I do really love the half moon hairstreak. It's got such a fun and unique story.
All
I
right.
would say the half moon hairstreak too, just because we're in Waterton and it's such a special species to us here in the park. So that would be my favorite.
Very cool. And I think one of the most interesting things is that picture you showed from above. That's not a very big area that it's living in. So that's a small bit of ecosystem that's being protected right now, and that it's relying on that population so much. A flood, a forest fire, wow, that could really shake up that whole population. All right, let us go online here. So we got a question here about what's being done. So are there any things that Waterton's doing actively right now to try and boost and protect the half moon hairstreak population?
So one of the big things is the partnership with the Wilder Institute and the Calgary Zoo, and I can let Dylan and Natalie talk a little bit more about that.
I was going to say one of the big things for Waterton, even just like locally here, is helping to remove invasive plant species from that Blackiston fan area. So we're helping to restore some of those native plant species like that solidago or goldenrod that you saw, or that lupin, so that the butterfly has more of a habitat on the Blackiston fan. And then, as Marion mentioned, we also partner with the Wilder Institute and the Calgary Zoo. So those folks come in often in the summertime, and they're helping us collect research on that half moon hairstreak butterfly that tells us about its population and if it's thriving.
All right. There we go. Good questions. Mr. Roy's crew, let's bring them in front and center. How are we doing today?
Good.
Awesome. I see someone ready to go from Toronto. What's your question?
Do you know how many would die a year or something? Or do some of them live longer, or no?
Some of the adults do live a little bit longer than 6 days, but not by much. And there is a butterfly count that happens where volunteers go out and count the amount of butterflies that they can see. They have got what they call transects. So that's like straight lines, and you walk through and you count the butterflies. But it's hard to tell an exact number. But the scientists and the volunteers do their best to get as close to an exact number as they can, doing the transects and the counts.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, we have your crew front and center. Do we have a second one? A follow-up. There we go.
Do you think that we don't know any butterflies that might be at risk here in Canada?
Well, the Species at Risk Act is public. So if you wanted to find out about species at risk that are near you, or butterflies in particular, you can actually go online and search the Species at Risk registry. And on one of the pages, you can actually type in a little search box and look for particular species to see if they're on the list. Or you can just type in butterfly and they'll have a list of those endangered butterflies or turtles or whatever species that you're interested in learning about.
And do you think that in Canada there's a butterfly we don't really know of a lot and it might be very close to endanger?
That's possible. It is possible. I mean, scientists are discovering new species all of the time. So it is possible. I don't know, but maybe that might be something that you could do some research on.
Yeah, and like Marion mentioned, it's really hard to count butterflies and get accurate numbers. So there could very well be some species that are getting close to threatened and we just don't know about it yet.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good question.
Really good question.
Let's slide over to YouTube here, and we'll grab a couple questions from here. So there we go. Okay, so Mrs. Latch Crew would like to know, in Waterton or any of the other mountain parks, are there any other success stories where we're seeing species that were maybe threatened, or on other different parts of kind of those 5 levels that you shared of species at risk? Are there any more success stories that you could share?
Well, we're hoping to have a success story in the next couple of years with the southern mountain the mountain population of the woodland caribou. There are some projects that are getting going in Jasper National Park to try and protect the populations of caribou that live there in Jasper. Because one of the herds has already been extirpated, and what they're trying to do is conservation breeding program. So while it isn't in effect yet, and it's still sort of in the development stages, hopefully that's going to be something that in the next 10, 20 years or so, we can look back and say, yes, we have a success story there. So that's one thing that we're looking forward to. And I believe in Banff, there was the reintroduction of the bison a few years ago as well. That their population seems to be doing pretty well. And so those are a couple of stories so far.
All right, excellent. Let's go back here and grab another few here. All right. So this is a question from a group here, and they're wondering about what can we do? So at a classroom level, of course, not all of us live near the park, but what are some things that we can do maybe locally in our communities, at our schools, at our homes to help species at risk?
Well, one thing that you can do is look to find local groups that are doing work in your community. I know that I've worked in some communities with local conservation groups that are going out and picking very specific areas to try and do some rehabilitation, removing invasive plants, for example. I volunteered with a group in Burnaby, which is just outside Vancouver, to remove some invasive plants from a creek area. So there are lots of things that you can do if you look for your local conservation groups and local efforts to remove invasive plants, reintroduce local plants. And talk to your communities about it. Do a little bit of research and find out some things that you can do, that you can learn about.
All right. There's something that I've been noticing more and more in my neighborhood is that neighbors are starting to leave their lawns and not cutting them until later in the year, closer to the summer. And because for our pollinators, those are excellent kind of little patches for them to move from place to place and find some food that they need. and things like that. So at first I thought maybe they're just being lazy and not going out and cutting their lawns, but they are doing it for a really good reason, to give those pollinators those extra spaces, those little islands where they can kind of move from place to place and find places to rest and food and things like that. So that's kind of a neat thing that you could do if you could convince your parents to let the lawn go a little wild to start the year.
Yeah, and another thing that you can do is just make sure if you're visiting places and if you're going paddling, for example, to clean your watercraft before you move from one place to another, because something that can cause threats to local species are invasive species. And if you clean your watercraft before you go from one lake to another, that can help prevent bringing something different in, or cleaning your shoes and that kind of thing. So those are little easy things that you can do to prevent movement of invasive species that can threaten the local species.
All right. Mr. Roy's crew, do we have another question there? I can bring you up front and center if someone wants to come up there for us.
What is it?
All right, I hear some thoughts. I think someone might come up. Here we go.
I have a question. What is the biggest species at risk? Like, I don't mean like largest, but like most endangered.
Most endangered? So that's a really good question. And I think that's something that you might want to look up on the registry of the species at risk, because there's as we know, there's various stages. So I think one of the species would be a species that's been extirpated in a lot of places, so that there's only a very small population that's still left.
Thank you.
All right. Good question. There are some species around the world. So we're going outside of Canada now, but some of their population numbers are down in double digits, and even smaller in some cases. So the subspecies, the northern white rhino, there's 2 individuals left at Old Pejeta Conservancy. They're both female. And when we lose them, we've lost an entire subspecies of a beautiful, large, charismatic animal. So you hate to see stories like that and hear about things like that happening, but that is the reality.
And one species that only exists in a very, very small area is the Vancouver Island marmot. And they live on Mount Washington and on Vancouver Island. And the ski hill, there's a ski hill there as well. And the ski hill always shuts down before the marmots emerge to help protect those marmots. So those are ones that are quite at risk, because they've only got a very, very small population in one particular area.
Yeah, so sometimes we do have to make sacrifices, and at the end of the day, they're small sacrifices, like migratory birds. When they're migrating, a lot of cities will turn the lights out at certain times of night, and that really helps the migratory birds species to get through the cities and not confused by the light. So that's another thing you can do. There's even a really cool app. I'm blanking on the name of it, but I can send it to the classrooms. I think it's Birdcast, and they forecast when the big flocks are going to be over your cities, so you know when to turn the lights off, which is really, really cool. All right, I'm going to take one more from YouTube, but I also see someone front and center here, so we'll get one more there.
If the sharks go extinct, are we gonna die because we're gonna eat sick fish?
Could you repeat your question? Are you saying if the sharks die?
If the sharks die, would we die?
That's a good question. There would definitely be a profound impact on the ecosystem in the ocean, especially because the creatures that sharks eat would become more and more populated, and that would have a ripple effect. Also,
I know something. Sharks eat sick fish. What happens if we eat sick fish? And then we get sick, basically.
Yeah, so that's something that we have to keep note about. You know, the impacts on small things moving up in the ladder. So whether I don't know for sure for that answer.
All right, I love that question though, because it means that you're thinking. And sharks are keystone species, just like wolves. If we lose sharks in the ocean, the ecosystems, the coral reef ecosystems, the health of the ocean will be in really deep trouble. And I think our crew with us would agree that biodiversity is so important in our everyday life, from the things that we make and use and eat. And the more we lose that biodiversity, the more we put ourselves at risk for future pandemics, for food shortages, and the list goes on and on and on. So protecting nature protects us. So it just makes sense. We're part of nature, even though sometimes we forget that, living in our houses with our air conditioning and our heat and things like that. But we are part of nature, and without nature, there's no us.
And that's why so many people are working hard to protect our ecosystems. The People of Parks Canada, other conservation groups, zoos, and people all across the world are working hard to protect our ecosystems, protect our biodiversity. There's lots of people out there that care. There's lots of people out there that are doing the work.
All right. Well, I want to start off by reminding everybody, if you want to jump into the next event in our Peak Discovery series, head over to the website and you can find all of the events coming up between now and June. Jump into those camera spots, jump into YouTube spots. You can even jump in an audio spot if you're a little shy and don't want to turn your camera on. We can get your voices in and get some of your questions that way. So do check it out and visit us there. Of course, you can check it out in French there as well. A shout out to our YouTube crews. We had a ton of over 80 classrooms registered today. So thank you so much for the great questions, for the great kahoots action. Thank you to our camera classrooms. A few ducked out early with recesses and lunches, but it was great to see you back there and being with us. And then Marian, Dylan, Natalie, thank you so much. It's so valuable to be stealing time like this. Because if scientists and conservationists are just talking to other scientists and conservationists, then the message isn't getting out. So thank you so much for joining us on this series and sharing your knowledge with us today.
Thanks so much, Joe.
All right, excellent. Well, thanks so much, everybody. We're going to sign off for today. Enjoy the rest of your week, but goodbye for now. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.